And churches throughout the world are proclaiming a simple 3-word message. Christ is risen. The Pope did it this morning. My good Christian friend here has been doing it this morning. All the churches throughout the world have got the same message, that a man 2,000 years ago rose from the dead on this Sunday, not on Good Friday, not on Saturday, but on this day 2,000 years ago. And as a Muslim, I obviously want to offer my reflections on that, because I don't believe that Jesus bodily rose from the dead. I don't believe the scriptures foretold it, and I don't believe it happened historically. But anyway, sorry, I'm now entering into polemics, so I'll now draw a line over that. That's it, end of my introduction, and I've now got 5 minutes, we've agreed beforehand, but I'll give my bit, and then my good friend here will give his response. I'm very liberal about this. If he wants more than 2 minutes, I'm not going to complain about it, to be honest.
So essentially what I am suggesting is that he'll do 5 minutes advancing his case, and I'll take 2 minutes just critiquing his case. He'll do 5 more minutes on his case, 2 more minutes critiquing, and then I'll take my 5 minutes advancing my case, where he can critique only for 2 minutes, and then 5-2. So it's 5-2, 5-2, and then 5-2, 5-2.
And Douglas has a PhD in mathematics. If none of that is clear, he will make that clearer for us.
It's a long time ago. I forgot it all.
He's fired.
Josh.
Right, are we ready? Action. Yep.
Okay.
Go. Okay. So, I just want to share with you what the earliest first-person witness to the resurrection of the appearance of the resurrected Jesus tells us. This comes a letter from St. Paul in the letter of the Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 3 onwards. Now, here's the earliest first-person account.
Why have you got that bit highlighted in yellow, Mr. Speaker?
Oh dear. First-person account we have in the Bible of a resurrection appearance. And I want to tell you what he said before we go on to other matters. And he says this: "For I hand on to you as of first importance what I in turn received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures."
I don't think that's the King James version, is it?
And then he appeared to Cephas, and then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have died. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to someone untimely born, he appeared also to me, for I am the least of the apostles. So he says, out of that long series of appearances, he also appeared to Paul. Now my point is this today. I'll make 2 essential points really. One is, where in the Scriptures, now what are the Scriptures? The Scriptures are the Jewish Bible. It begins in Genesis, goes all the way up to Malachi in the Protestant Bible.
It's not called Bible, it's called Torah.
Okay. And I want to know where...
Jesus isn't his name, by the way. Okay. Jesus is Greek, it means son of Zeus.
Thank you. You're very learned.
Thank you.
Can I just try my own point?
Joshua, son of Joseph.
Right.
Yehoshua ben Yusuf.
Although I'm not as learned as this man, I will continue in my own poor way to have a go at this debate.
You're very modest, Paul.
I'm also being sarcastic. You recognise that? Just give me 10 extra seconds for the interruption. Well, okay. My point is this: where in the Jewish Bible, that includes the Torah and the prophets and the writings, does it say that the Christ, that's the Messiah in Hebrew, would die for sins and then be raised on the third day according to the Jewish scripture? That's what it says in here. That's my first question to any Christian, to this gentleman here. Where does it say the Messiah would die and be raised on the third day? That's my first question, my first point, if you like. And secondly, what about the resurrection appearances themselves? This is what Paul says of them in Acts. And he's talking to King Agrippa. He's been arrested, he's going off ultimately to Rome to be martyred. And he says, "After that, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision." This heavenly vision, if you look at the preceding verses, refers to the appearance of Jesus on the road to Damascus, where Jesus appears to him and says, "Why are you persecuting me, Paul? I'm Jesus." Paul calls the appearance of the resurrected Jesus to him a vision, a heavenly vision. So the people who were with him saw nothing. An important point of evidence. The resurrected Jesus appears to an apostle of God, and the apostle himself, the people who were with him, saw nothing. And remember, this is supposed to be a bodily resurrection, a resurrection from the dead, and yet no one saw anything apart from Paul, who had a heavenly vision. So I would maintain, and remember the Gospels were written, maybe 40, 50, 60 years after Paul said they were heavenly vision to King Agrippa. They were written much, much longer afterwards, where I would argue this story had become embellished, had developed, had become mythologized. So what started off as a vision, like the vision of Mary or the vision of whoever, Vishnu, whatever you want to call it, people had visions all the time in religious history. Even today people have visions. I'm not doubting that Paul had a vision, but this is the resurrected Christ that we are celebrating today. And it was a vision, the people with him saw nothing. So I maintain that it started off as a vision. It became, in the retelling of the story, year after year, decade after decade, eventually, when it was set down in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, it became a very physical story. But it wasn't originally. So my twofold challenge is, where does the Jewish Bible say the Messiah would die and be raised on the third day? Because I have read all of the Bible, every book of the Bible a number of times. I've personally never come across this. Maybe this learned brother can put me right today and show me where it says that. And secondly, does he agree with Paul that the resurrection appearances were in fact visions initially, and as the story got told they became physicalized, embellished, mythologized? And I'm going to give up my last 30 seconds. I've said what I want to say. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for this opportunity. So Paul has raised two specific points in regards to resurrection. The first point he has raised is that, of course, the New Testament talks about Christ having died and Christ rising up on the third day according to the Hebrew scriptures. So Paul's challenge is, where in the Hebrew scriptures do you find the resurrection having been prophesied, and especially the resurrection on the third day? All right. The answer is pretty simple, and the answer has been provided quite explicitly in the book of Acts. In the preaching of Peter, in the book of Acts, chapter 2, Peter quite clearly talks about this. Acts chapter 2, verse 27, where Peter refers to an Old Testament prophecy which says, "For you will not leave my soul in Hades, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. You have made known to me the ways of life. You will make me full of joy in your presence." So Peter answered our Paul's question a long time ago, soon after resurrection. But Peter points out to a prophecy which is in the book of Psalms. In the book of Psalms, chapter 16, verses 8 to 11, where the psalmist says, "I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad, and my glory rejoices. My flesh also will rest in hope, for you will not leave my soul in Sheol." That's the prophecy.
So which one is that? Sorry. Which 15? 16. Beg your pardon. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So, prophecy about resurrection right there. Jonah, third day, coming back from Sheol. Two specific prophecies put together on the third day, resurrection in the Old Testament. Paul, now I haven't got much time, just a few more seconds if I may take. This our Paul essentially said, Apostle Paul just had a vision. I have a problem. I have many points in regard to that, but I'll just raise one point for the lack of time here, which is, how can a vision blind a person? Paul was blinded, and the blind Paul was taken into the city, and when he was inside the city, when he was prayed, scales fell off his eyes. Now, is that a vision, or is that a real blindness with a real scale falling off his eyes for him to regain his sight? Very important. Not a spiritual vision, but a physical reality in Paul's life. Blindness followed by scales falling off, followed by being able to see again. Physical resurrection is what physical experience is what Paul had. You have 5 minutes, Paul.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that. Yeah. Psalm 16, let's have a look at it. I've got it's not a Muslim Bible, by the way, it's the Holy Bible, the New Revised Standard Version. It's a standard academic Bible, which I use at university when I was studying the New Testament, recommended by the most academics in Britain and America recommend this translation. The most accurate translation. Let's look at Psalm 16. It says, a Psalm of David. So we know that the speaker here is David. He says this. Remember the question, by the way, where does it say in the Jewish Bible that the Messiah, or the Christ, would die and then be raised again on the third day? Have that statement in the forefront of your mind, and let's see if it is found in Psalm 16, as my good friend here says. So that's the challenge. Let me read it to you in this very good translation of David. Protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to God, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. As for the holy ones in the land, they are noble, in whom is all my delight. Those whom choose another God multiply their sorrows. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out, or take their names upon my lips. The Lord is upon my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. I have a goodly heritage. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night he instructs me. I keep the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad, and my soul rejoices. My body also rests secure. For you do not give me up to Sheol, or let your faithful one see the pit. You show me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. In your right hand are pleasures forevermore. End of Psalm. End of Psalm. Where does it say in that psalm that the Messiah would die and on the third day be raised again from the dead? It doesn't mention a Messiah. No one actually dies in this. It's just, you have not abandoned me to Sheol. It's a poetic figure of speech. It doesn't say he'd be risen again on the third day. It certainly doesn't say, as Paul also says of the scriptures, that it says the Messiah would die for sin. It doesn't say that either. So I'm afraid that this challenge has not been met so far. It doesn't mention a Messiah, death, 3 days, or resurrection, or anything else. It's just David saying, thank you, God, for being faithful to me. It's a great psalm and nothing to do with Christian belief, in my view. Secondly, to come back to the resurrection appearances, these are supposedly our physical bodily appearances, as solid as we are here today, where you can actually touch and see the physical Jesus. And yet, according to the earliest account we have, the people who were with Paul, the Apostle Paul, saw nothing, as Paul was having the vision of the resurrected Jesus. This is damnable evidence that the earliest resurrection appearance was not a physical appearance. It cannot have been physical unless everyone else was blind in the first place. So I come back to the 2 points I made. I've yet to hear a prophecy in the Old Testament that Christ died on the third day, rose from the dead. And why did no one in Paul's entourage see anything? You mentioned the scales falling by the light. That's not my point. The point is, it was a physical bodily resurrection. No, why did no one see with Paul a physically bodily resurrected Jesus? You would expect to see it if it was a bodily resurrection. So I'll give up my last 2 minutes. I've said my piece.
All right. Paul, our friend Paul here, seemed to undermine King David so much. Any Jew who would know about the Messiah would very, very strongly object to that. Because Messiah, according to Jewish scriptures, is seen as a Davidic king. Messiah, according to Jewish scriptures, as a matter of fact, by Jews today even, the Messiah himself is actually called as David or Davidic Messiah also. In other words, the Messiah is very, very tightly seen with David, King David himself. Now, adding to that, let's read specifically the 2 verses I care about in this regard, which is verses 9 and 10, where David, saying something which doesn't really apply to his life directly, let's see what he says. My flesh also will rest in hope, for you will not leave my soul in Sheol. David says his soul will not be left in Sheol. And then he goes on, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. Which Holy One was David himself talking about? If the Holy Messiah is much more than David, and David is, let's say, a top guy in Jewish ideas. The point is this, my dear friends, David is referring to the one above him, the one far more superior to him, who is the Messiah himself. Talking about the Messiah, he says, the Holy One will not see corruption. What is he talking about? Even if his body dies, the body will not completely be corrupted, but it will come back. That was David's point. I can't see why our friend Paul here doesn't see that point. Now, he also went back again to Apostle Paul's vision on the road to Damascus, we need to look at two things there. Number one, Paul had a physical implication because of what he saw. The idea is that he had a physical implication, number one. How can you say something to be a dream or just a mere vision when someone is blinded because of that? Add to that, Paul has that same narration, not in just one place, but in 2 or 3 separate places. We need to combine all of them together to get a conclusion. But my 2 minutes is over now. So my conclusion is, Paul, physical blindness, and therefore something which happened in physical reality. Not a dream, not a vision.
Right, so that's 5252. No, it's the other way. 5252. Yeah?
You get another 5 minutes now?
Yeah.
I get 5 minutes, you can critique my case.
No, fine. I mean, if you're happy to just carry on, you can talk for 2 minutes. Okay, carry on. Okay, I want to answer your points, though. It's natural to not answer your point.
We can, but the point is, if we keep on arguing like that, we won't proceed much. So I need to advance my case here also.
Advance away. Advance. We'll have to come back to your points then later on.
After we do 5252, we can.
Okay.
Now, I'd like to present a few, this is my 5 minutes where Paul would critique my case. I'd like to present a few very important things in Jesus' life. Very important things in Jesus' life. And here I present that in a tabular form. And I'll read that out to you also, which is, Jesus is a very popular Jewish name, but to speak about a very particular Jesus, the Jesus we care about, the Bible talks about that specific Jesus, whose brother was James, whose father was Joseph, mother was Mary, and so on. Gives additional details, and more importantly, this particular Jesus is uniquely identified by him being called the Christ. And that particular Jesus having disciples, extravagant claims about himself, new teaching, not just the Old Testament, but New Testament. Jesus himself said, I've come to give new wine in new wineskin. And then this Jesus did signs and wonders, miracles. In the day and age when people were even led to think the Messiah would never die, he would just live forever, where dying Messiah is an alien idea, this Jesus was accused, this Jesus offended Jewish leadership, and the Jewish leadership retaliated by planning to destroy him. The Jewish leadership accused him, and they took Jesus to the Romans, for the Romans to condemn him, and finally he was crucified. Now, when Jesus was crucified, the Bible also says nature itself responded to the crucifixion. And also later on, disciples come to believe in Jesus' resurrection. Disciples worship Jesus. And the early church was persecuted for all that we spoke about right now, especially for the fact of the disciples worshipping this person who they also claim to have died, who have been buried, and who rose up again back to life. And the early church grew right in Jerusalem, right beginning in the 1st century. Now, for these specific 16 points I raised, the Christian Gospels give detailed accounts. But add to the Christian Gospels in secular historical artifacts, and I've listed down numbers which I've given for them in my examination, we find secular historical artifacts